Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just jump right into it today. We're looking at the very fuel that runs our entire economic engine, and that is human labor. When an economy is humming along smoothly, it's because people are out there working, producing, and innovating. But what actually happens when that engine starts sputtering? Well, today we are unpacking one of the absolute most critical macroeconomic problems any society faces: unemployment and underemployment.
Okay, let's dive into this. Consider this thought for a second. Human resources are the real wealth of a nation. When they remain idle, the nation's potential remains unfulfilled. Think about that. We so often measure wealth in gold or currency or natural resources, right? But it's actually the human resource that creates the real value. When a workforce is sitting idle, it's literally like a massive, powerful engine trying to run on only half its cylinders. The potential is absolutely there, but the output, it's just lost forever.
So to figure out how to get this engine back in working order, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll be defining the labor problem. Second, measuring the workforce. Third, we'll look at the impacts on the economy. And finally, number 4, the causes and government solutions.
All right, let's start with part 1, defining the labor problem and looking at the types of unemployment. We really have to draw a hard line between two distinct conditions here: unemployment and underemployment. Unemployment is the one we hear about all the time on the news. It's when people who are able and willing to work at the prevailing wage rate simply cannot find a job. You want to work, you're ready to go, but the door is shut. Underemployment, on the other hand, is a bit more sneaky. This is a situation where people are employed, but their skills, time, or productivity just aren't being completely utilized. Imagine having a master's degree in engineering, but you're working a job that only requires a high school diploma. Or maybe you want to work 40 hours a week, but you're only getting scheduled for 10. You have a job, sure, but your potential is severely underutilized.
Now, let's break unemployment down a bit further, because not all joblessness is created equal. We've got 5 main types to cover here, so let's do this rapid fire. First up, frictional unemployment. This is short-term. It happens simply because it takes time to find a job. If you quit your job today to look for a better one tomorrow, you are frictionally unemployed during that gap. It's totally normal and just a natural part of a dynamic economy.
Next is structural unemployment, and this one's a much deeper systemic issue. This happens due to fundamental changes in the structure of the economy, very often driven by new technology. Say a new piece of software completely automates an industry. The workers who lose their jobs might find that their specific skills just aren't needed anywhere else anymore. The structure of the economy has basically left them behind. Then we have cyclical unemployment. This is directly tied to the overall health of the economy. When the business cycle takes a downturn, like during a recession, businesses sell less, they produce less, and therefore they hire less. The unemployment that results from this overall economic slump is cyclical. Fourth is seasonal unemployment. This one is entirely predictable. It happens in certain seasons when the demand for a specific type of labor just drops off. The classic example here is agriculture. You need a massive workforce for the fall harvest, but you need far fewer hands in the dead of winter. Finally, we have disguised unemployment. This is a fascinating, almost invisible inefficiency. It's when more people are working on a task than are actually needed. So if you have a small family farm that really only requires 3 people to operate, but 5 family members are working on it just out of necessity, those extra 2 people aren't actually adding to the total output. Their unemployment is essentially disguised by their presence on the farm. Shifting gears back over to underemployment, we see 3 primary ways a worker's engine can be throttled back. There's time-related underemployment, which is working less time than you desire. There's skill-related underemployment, where your job just doesn't match or utilize your higher-level skills. And lastly, income-related underemployment,
where despite working, you're earning less than a minimum acceptable income. In all these cases, the worker just isn't hitting full throttle.
Okay, moving on to part 2, measuring the workforce. And the labor force concept. So how do we actually ground these concepts in real math? We use the labor force concept. It starts with the working age population, which is generally everyone 15 years old and above. But we don't count all of them. We split this group into 2. On one side, we have those not in the labor force. These are your students, homemakers, retired folks, people who are not economically active right now. On the other side, we have the actual labor force. This is the economically active population, and it's made up of 2 distinct groups, the employed and the unemployed.
And that brings us to the crucial formula. The unemployment rate is the number of unemployed divided by the total labor force multiplied by 100 to get a percentage. But here is a really critical detail you have to remember. To be counted as unemployed in this formula, you must be actively seeking a job. If you just give up looking, you drop out of the labor force entirely, and you're no longer counted in this specific rate.
Let's move to part 3, the macroeconomic impacts on the economy.
When we look at macroeconomic models, like the aggregate supply and aggregate demand model, the massive consequences of unemployment become brilliantly clear. If you think about a vertical line representing full employment output, basically where our economy should be operating, and then realize our current equilibrium is sitting way below that, that gap means unemployment exists. We are operating below our true potential. This relates directly to something called Oken's law, which mathematically links this loss of national income or real GDP to the unemployment rate. Quite simply, when people don't work, the entire nation's output shrinks. Let's list out what these effects actually look like on the ground, because they hit both the economy and society incredibly hard. On the pure economic side, you have a massive loss of productive resources and lower national income, meaning a lower real GDP. You've got a tragic wastage of human capital as skills degrade over time. It creates lower tax revenue for the government while simultaneously creating a higher financial burden to support those without work. And the social ripples? They are severe. It leads directly to increased poverty, worsening inequality, and breeds deep social problems, including frustration and rising crime rates.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, Causes and Government Solutions.
So, why do unemployment and underemployment occur in the first place? Well, the root causes span across a few different areas. First, slow economic growth and low aggregate demand. If the economy is sluggish, businesses just aren't hiring. Second, like we talked about earlier, structural changes and rapid technological progress can quickly outpace workers' skills. Third, we have seasonal and institutional factors. And finally, demographic pressures play a huge role. High population growth combined with low capital formation means there just aren't enough resources or newly created businesses to absorb the surging number of young workers entering the labor force.
So, what's the cure? How does the government step in and fix this? They have to act decisively. They can increase investment to actively promote overall economic growth. They must invest heavily in skill development and vocational training so workers can actually adapt to those technological changes. They can launch large-scale public works and infrastructure projects to create jobs directly. And, crucially, they can encourage entrepreneurship and support micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, to really foster job creation from the ground up.
Which brings us to our big overarching lesson for today. The ultimate macroeconomic goal is full employment. Now, that doesn't mean zero unemployment. Remember, a little frictional unemployment is natural, but it means all resources, including labor, are fully utilized. Reducing both unemployment and underemployment isn't just about tweaking statistics. It is absolutely essential for sustainable economic development and making sure we have a higher standard of living for everyone in society. I want to leave you with this final thought. We are living in an era of incredibly rapid structural changes and staggering technological progress. As automation and AI completely reshape the global landscape, look around you. Is your nation truly utilizing its real wealth, its human resources? Or is that incredible potential just sitting idle, waiting to be unlocked? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible engine of our economy.